Okay, buckle up because today we're going deep, really deep into trophy wife secrets.
Trophy wife secrets.
Yeah, so there's this YouTube video, and this woman basically lays out her whole philosophy on like living the high life and
Oh, wow.
how she gets quote unquote spoiled by her husband.
Interesting.
Yeah, so she's super open about it. Like she talks about specific tactics and
Like a how-to guide.
kinda, yeah. And some of it's pretty controversial. Even she admits that like YouTube might flag her for some of the stuff she talks about.
That's bold.
I know, right? So we're gonna break it all down, look at the psychology behind it, and try to figure out like, is this actually empowering or just straight up manipulative? What do you think?
I'm intrigued. Let's dive in.
Okay, so her first big point is all about looking good. She basically says that like physical appearance is like non-negotiable if you want to keep your husband's attention and keep those gifts coming.
It's interesting how she frames it, right? Like, it's not just about taking pride in your appearance. It's about, like, actively using it as a strategy to manage his behavior.
Yeah, totally. She even says that, like, a little bit of jealousy is a good thing, you know? Like, he should be a little worried when she goes out without him. Like, someone might try to steal her away.
So she's creating a sense of scarcity.
Scarcity.
Yeah, it's this psychological principle. When something's less available, we tend to want it more. So if she makes herself seem less available, even just subtly, he might find her even more desirable.
Oh, that's really smart, actually. So it's like reverse psychology.
Kinda, yeah. It's about playing with his perceptions.
And she's got like a whole routine for this looking good strategy. She's always got her hair and makeup done, wearing cute outfits, even just around the house.
That takes effort.
A lot of effort.
Yeah, I mean, think about the time and energy that goes into that. It's almost like a full-time job.
Right. And it makes you wonder, like, is she doing this for herself or for him? Or maybe a little bit of both.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, she's clearly taking control of her image and using it to her advantage. But on the other hand, it does perpetuate this idea that a woman's worth is tied to her appearance, which, can be a slippery slope.
Yeah, it's complicated.
No.
Okay, so moving on to her next tip, and this one is kind of surprising. She calls it minding your business. Basically, she says that, like, focusing too much on your husband can actually backfire.
So it's about creating healthy space.
Exactly. She actually tells this story about how she signed up for an online program just to have something else to focus on besides her husband, and she claims that's when he started, like, showering her with gifts and attention. Like, he suddenly realized he had to step up his game.
It's like she took a step back and he leaned in.
Yeah, like she became more interesting because she wasn't constantly available.
And it plays into that scarcity principle again.
Right. The less available she is, the more he wants her.
It's also about maintaining a sense of individuality within the relationship, not losing yourself in the dynamic of being a wife.
I like that. Okay, and her next piece of advice, well, it might ruffle some feathers.
I'm right. Hit me.
She calls it the affection paradox.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing.
Basically, she says that being less affectionate can actually make you more desirable.
Oh, wow. So it's like playing hard to get?
Kind of, yeah. Even within a committed relationship, she thinks that, like, holding back a little can spark his pursuit instinct, make him work for it.
That's a risky move.
Totally. I mean, it might work for some couples, but I can also see how it could backfire big time.
For sure. It requires a lot of self-awareness and a deep understanding of your partner's needs and insecurities.
Yeah, and if it comes across as, like, manipulative or insincere, it could really damage the relationship.
Trust is key.
Exactly. Okay, and now for her most controversial piece of advice, the one she says might get her flagged by YouTube.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
She's very open about using intimacy strategically to get what she wants.
Wow, she's really pushing boundaries here.
Right. She even talks about how she appeals to his, like, baser instincts, makes him think with his little brain. So he's more likely to say yes to whatever she wants, whether it's a new handbag or a vacation.
So it's about leveraging her power in the relationship.
It seems like it, but it makes you wonder, like, is this really a healthy dynamic? Is she creating this transactional relationship where he feels like he has to, pay for her affection?
It's a slippery slope, that's for sure. And it raises a lot of ethical questions about consent and manipulation within a marriage.
And remember, this is all from her perspective.
Yeah.
We don't know her husband's side of the story or how he feels about this dynamic.
Right. And it's important to note that she specifically says this is for married couples only. She actually discourages unmarried women from using this tactic.
Yeah, she says it devalues sex and undermines a woman's position in the relationship.
It's an interesting nuance, and it speaks to a broader conversation about gender roles and power dynamics between men and women.
Yeah, it's like, Are we reinforcing these old-fashioned ideas about women using their sexuality to manipulate men, or is she actually flipping the script and taking control?
It's a complex issue, for sure. And it's something we need to be mindful of as we unpack the rest of her trophy wife secrets.
So we've covered a lot of ground already with just these first few secrets, and we haven't even gotten to the really shocking stuff. Her, what she calls the big brain, little brain approach to getting what she wants.
Oh, I'm definitely curious to hear more about that.
Well, let's take a quick pause here to digest what we've learned so far. We'll be back in a flash to unpack the rest of her controversial advice.
Sounds good.
Okay, we're back. And I gotta say, I'm still processing some of these trophy wife secrets.
It's a lot to take in, right? Like, is she for real? Is she trolling us? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's what makes this so fascinating. It's like we're getting this glimpse into a world that we normally wouldn't have access to.
Right, like we're all curious about how the other half lives, right? And she's not holding back.
Not at all. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about how she uses intimacy strategically. Now, she takes this a step further with what she calls the big brain, little brain approach.
This is the one she said might get her flagged on YouTube, right?
Yeah, this is it. So basically, she's saying that men operate from their little brain, which is all about instinct and instant gratification.
Like the primal urges.
Exactly. And women, we have the big brain, which is more logical, more strategic.
Okay, I see where she's going with this.
So she says you got to learn to work the little brain, appeal to his desires, make him think with his lower half, and he'll be putty in your hands.
And doesn't that feel a bit manipulative?
I know, that's what I thought. But she frames it as this, like, fun, playful thing, Like she's rewarding him for good behavior.
Rewarding him. Like with what?
Well,
I mean, it's one thing to be aware of your partner's needs and desires and to communicate effectively. But to, like, dangle rewards in front of him? That just seems icky to me.
Yeah, it feels very transactional, right? Like he does this and then she'll give him that.
Exactly.
Right.
It reduces the relationship to a series of transactions, which is not exactly a recipe for a loving, intimate connection.
And her whole big brain, little brain thing, it's kind of reductive, don't you think?
For sure. It reinforces these outdated gender stereotypes that suggest men are incapable of rational thought and emotional depth.
Yeah, it's like, are we really going to buy into this idea that men are just driven by their hormones?
I think it's more complex than that. Men are capable of love, empathy, and making decisions based on something other than their little brain.
Okay, but let's try to be objective for a moment. Putting aside the ethical concerns, do you think there's anything we can learn from her approach?
That's a good question.
Mm.
I mean, she clearly understands the power of influence. She knows how to get what she wants.
So maybe it's not about manipulating your partner, but about being more strategic in how you communicate your needs and desires.
Maybe. Like, instead of nagging or complaining, you could try framing your requests in a way that appeals to his interests or motivations.
So, like, instead of saying, honey, can you please take out the trash? You could say, hey, if you take out the trash, then we'll have more time to.
Exactly. It's about finding a win-win solution.
But even if we try to apply her tactics in an ethical way, there's still this underlying question of effort, right? Like,
Yeah.
She makes it clear that maintaining this trophy wife lifestyle is a lot of work.
Yeah, she's always got to be on, always got to look perfect, always got to be planning these elaborate dates.
It sounds exhausting. Like, what happens when she just wants to chill in sweatpants and watch Netflix?
Right. Or what if she gets sick or has a bad day? Does the whole system fall apart?
That's what makes me wonder if this is really sustainable. Like, is it possible to maintain this level of effort over the long term?
I have my doubts. I mean, it's one thing to do it for a while, but eventually you're going to get tired.
And what happens then? Does the magic wear off?
Maybe. Or maybe he starts to resent her for not being the perfect trophy wife all the time.
So it's like, even if it works in the short term, it might not be a recipe for a happy, lasting relationship.
Exactly. It's like building a house on a foundation of sand. It might look good at first, but it's not going to stand the test of time.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a moment. She's clearly found an audience for her trophy wife secrets. She's got a huge following on YouTube. She's selling courses and products.
Yeah, she's built a whole brand around this persona.
What do you think that says about our culture?
I think it speaks to a certain level of dissatisfaction, maybe even disillusionment with modern relationships. Like, people are looking for quick fixes, easy solutions.
So they're drawn to her message because it seems to offer a clear path to happiness and success.
Maybe, but it's a very narrow path, and it might not be the right path for everyone.
Right. It's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to relationships. What works for her might not work for you, and that's okay.
Absolutely. It's about finding what works for you and your partner. And that might take some trial and error, some open communication, and a willingness to compromise.
Well said. Okay, we've got one more part of this deep dive to go, and I'm really curious to hear your final thoughts on what this all means for modern relationships. Stay tuned. All right, we're back for the final round of our Trophy Wife Secrets. Deep dive. It's been a wild ride, hasn't it?
It really has.
Yeah.
I have to admit, when we first started talking about this, I was a little skeptical.
Yeah.
Like, is this for real? Is this woman just putting on a show for the internet?
I know, right? But as we've dug deeper, I've started to see her in different light. Like maybe she's just trying to empower women to take control of their lives and their relationships, even if her methods are a little unconventional.
Maybe.
Hmm.
But even if her intentions are good, there's still this question of authenticity, right? Like, is this really who she is, or is she just playing a role?
That's a good question. And I don't think we can answer that definitively, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that she's built a successful brand around this persona.
Absolutely. She's got books, courses, products, a huge following on social media. Clearly, her message is resonating with a lot of people.
Which makes you wonder, why? What is it about her trophy wife secrets that's so appealing?
I think for some women, it's about taking control. Like, in a world where they feel like they're constantly being told what to do, how to be, how to look, she's saying, screw that. I'm going to do things my way, and I'm going to get what I want.
So it's like a form of rebellion.
Maybe. Or maybe it's just about wanting to feel valued and appreciated. Like, in a world where women are often overlooked or taken for granted, she's saying, hey, I deserve to be treated like a queen.
And she's backing it up with, like, tangible results. She's got the fancy house, the designer clothes, the lavish vacations. It's like she's living proof that her methods work.
But at what cost?
Yeah.
That's a question that keeps coming back to me. Like, is this really a sustainable way to live? Is she truly happy?
I don't know. But I do think she's sparked an important conversation about relationships, about gender roles, about the expectations that society places on women.
And I think it's up to each individual to decide what they take away from this. Like, what resonates with you? What makes you uncomfortable? And how can you apply these ideas to your own life in a way that feels authentic and empowering?
Exactly. It's not about blindly following her advice, but about taking what works for you and leaving the rest behind.
And it's about remembering that there's no one right way to do relationships. What works for her might not work for you, and that's okay.
Absolutely. It's about finding what works for you and your partner, and that takes communication, honesty, and a willingness to compromise.
And sometimes it takes a little trial and error.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the world of trophy wife secrets, and we've come to the conclusion that there's no easy answer.
Relationships are complex, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
But I think the most important thing is that we're having these conversations, that we're challenging the status quo, and that we're encouraging each other to think critically about the choices we make in our own lives.
And that's what this deep dive is all about.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this episode, I want to thank you for joining us on this journey. It's been a pleasure exploring these trophy wife secrets with you.
It's been a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and I'm sure we'll be talking about this for weeks to come.
Oh, absolutely. And to all of you listening out there, thank you for tuning in. We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. And if you're looking for more thought-provoking content, be sure to subscribe to the deep dive wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll see you next time.